Hello and welcome back to Breaking Down Better Call Saul. For context, for anyone who might be watching these in order, for the the four people who watch them anyway, the last episode of this series, I was talking about episode 609, Fun and Games, and I recorded that review about half an hour before the literal live showing of episode 610, Nippy. And now a couple of hours after that showing. It's 4 o'clock in the morning. I'm really tired. It's boiling here in the UK. We're just coming off the heat wave, but with the lights up as well. It's just like it's miserable. But I just wanted to sit down and talk about this when the episode was really fresh, because it's been instantly divisive online. Episode 10 of season 6 of Better Call Saul, Nippy. So last episode we saw the kind of conclusion of the Jimmy McGill, Kim Wexler story, with the very dramatic previous 3 episodes leading up to it, and then one coda sequence of Saul Goodman in the Breaking Bad timeline. Now we move to Gene Takovic in 2010, and I was surprised to learn this. There was an interview with the writer of this episode on the Hollywood Reporter that went live like during the episode when it came out. And the Hollywood Reporter, I'm pretty sure it's Hollywood Reporter, but regardless, the interviewer asked the writer of this episode, that they figured out from like a news recording or something that was in one of the previous Gene black and white sequences that it was around September 2010 or October 2010, and that the football game that Jeff, I think it's, no, not Jeff, Jerry? I can't remember, but the security guard who, Gene, we'll call him Gene, we know it's Jimmy, who Gene befriends in this episode, he's talking about a football game. And they figured out with the football game that it was in October 2010, which is like 5 weeks after Walt dies in Breaking Bad. At first I thought, there's no way that like Gene has like been in like this Cinnabon in Nebraska for 5 weeks and he's already been spotted by someone. But no, I forget that of course in Breaking Bad, Walt went away, Saul went away, and then Walt was away for a while before he actually died, and the whole kind of finale came together in Felina, the final episode of Breaking Bad. So it makes sense. So that's interesting. And the writer said, well, I'm not saying anything for now. So I don't know how much that is going to affect things. The fact that Walt very recently died during the Gene timeline is kind of interesting to me. I'm a little bit intrigued by that, but regardless. So we have an entire episode dedicated to Gene. We hadn't seen him all season, and it felt like it felt like a great point to do it, because we had the huge shock of episode 7. We had the drama and excitement and kind of horror of episode 8, and then the kind of devastation, the slow, drawn-out devastation of episode 9 with Fun and Games. And now we go to something, and now for something completely different, right? We get fun back in the show, which, I mean, like I was saying earlier, I'm glad we had the fun in the first 3 episodes with the Howard scheme, but knowing where it leads, it kind of makes it a little bit less fun. This was out and out fun. This episode was a blast. This was Gene slipping Gene. He was pulling a scam again. We get introduced to Carol Burnett, legendary actress who I felt for sure was going to be playing Kim's mother, but of course that would have been all too easy. She is the mother of Jeffy, who is the cab driver who recognized Saul in season 4. Recognized Gene as Saul in the mall in season 4 of Better Call Saul. I can't all these names and things, but he was the guy who was like, "Hey, you're the guy. Say it," and he's like, "Better Call Saul." He ekes out of him, but he's like, "Yeah, I know you, man. I'm back in Albuquerque." But there's a kind of mildly threatening kind of tone to it. Season 5, apparently he's also the cab driver who picks him up from the airport, and he mentions he's a cab driver. Now, unfortunately, with the scheduling, the actor couldn't reprise his role, so we have someone who looks quite different playing this same guy. So I feel like it's kind of going to be an issue for some people, and it was a bit weird for me at first too, but I think that, first you really need to have seen season 4 and 5 recently to catch what's going on here, I think, and really understand it when he first shows up in the episode early on. But also the fact that we've never seen this guy, like this visual face before, it makes it a little bit of a leap when he finally does enter the episode. So anyway, so Carol Burnett is the mother of Jeffy, the cab driver. We open the episode with her in black and white, and she's trying to get home on her little mobility scooter, and she gets caught on something in the snow, and she said, "Well, that wasn't there before." And then we see a hand stapling, "My dog has lost," flyers, and the dog's called Nippy, and of course it's Gene, and he offers to help this woman, Marion, to push her over this little hump in the ice, and he gets behind her, leans down, and just very quickly and efficiently uses a kind of wire cutter to sever the connection of her mobility scooter. It's like, oh my god, he's going back to Slippin' Jimmy. And I felt like, no, like you're proving Chuck right. Like, people don't change. I know what you are, what you'll always be, Slippin' Jimmy. It was almost like, no, don't do this. And then, he goes in with her, and he's kind of like very jovial and kind of charms her and stuff. And then the cab pulls up, and it's this character. And he walks in and sees Saul Goodman sat in his kitchen with his mother, having a whale of a time. And he's very suspicious. And you don't, unless you remembered this guy, and also know that it's the guy who looked different, played by a different actor, you wouldn't quite read the situation. The fact that he knows that this is Saul Goodman, and he was kind of using that information against him a little bit, or kind of maybe. So that was a really see, I got it because I'd read online that the cab driver has been recast, and I thought, well, if he's been recast, it's for a reason, and that character's going to pop up again in a significant way. So it's kind of brilliant when she says, "My son's a cab driver," and Gene's like, "Oh, you ever pick up anyone famous?" I love that shit. And then they go out into the backyard, and he's just like, "Hey, like, what are you doing here?" And Gene's like, "Look, I know what this is. You want to blackmail me? You want money?" He's like, "Nah, you want in the game. I don't know what you're talking about. You know what I'm talking about." And he's like, "I'll teach you the game, and then we're done." And I'm like, "Oh wow, he's gonna teach this guy the ways of Slippin' Jimmy," and then he's devised this whole scheme, which in typical Better Call Saul fashion, we find out more later on, because first we see him planting the first seeds, which is getting into the good graces of the security team at the mall that he works at. And I love this whole section of the episode where he kind of is winning over the trust of these guys and really becoming friends with, I think it's Jerry, the big security guard, who he would time how long he would eat the Cinnabon that he brought for him every night, so that his back was from the cameras. And he's devised it, and it just, the whole seeing Jimmy running a scam, it was, and it's kind of a low stakes one, well, actually it's not really, because if he gets caught, he's fucked. But relatively speaking, this isn't like $7 million in the desert. This is stealing a few designer clothes from one of the department stores in the mall. And the way that he sets it up, and they builds the floor plan out in a snowfield, and he's kind of training the guy to to pick 3 items here, 3 items there, and he's mapped it all out, and he's done his homework, and Jeffy's a bit like, oh, this seems stupid, or it seems like this isn't going to work. And then Gene's like, hey, you know what's weird? It's a 50-year-old chemistry teacher coming into me with cancer, and within a year he has enough money, a pile of money the size of a Volkswagen. That's what's weird. So I saw people online saying my bet is that actually means Walt. But obviously he's talking about Heisenberg, and other people were saying quite rightly that this Jeff guy was questioning the logic and the soundness of Gene's plan, and Gene's just like, hey, motherfucker, I literally created Heisenberg, which isn't quite the truth, but Saul had a huge, an instrumental part to play in Walter White and his empire building, basically, and it was really cool to see Jimmy back in that kind of game again. But I was still thinking, like, this isn't going to end well. So the scheme is ready to go. This Jeff guy's ready to do it. And I love the kind of Trojan horse move they played where, like, this delivery guy turns up with a massive box. And the woman at the department store's like, we don't sell this. What are you doing? And then Gene sweet talks her on the phone. Okay, I'll pick the case up in the morning. I'll bring you some flowers, you know. And of course, you know, once she leaves, I get to see what's going on, that Jeff was hiding inside the box and was going to fill the box up with all these designer clothes. And just the tension of it was like, oh my God, when like the security guard's finishing his Cinnabon and then the guy slips. And they really played that well, because when he slips, I thought, oh no, this is it. That guy's out cold. Like, he's going to get caught. Gene's going to get caught. Like, Gene's going to go to prison. I thought this is going to be like a huge monumental shift in the story, and we're going to see like a massive change. But then, you know, Jimmy, he pulls out all the stops and he kind of, he plays the emotion card and just breaks down basically, and starts talking about how miserable his life is, how he's got no one. He talks about how, you know, I don't have any kids, you know, my brother's dead, my parents are dead. And he lingers on the brother line, and you know he's thinking about Chuck. There's no way he can't, right? Now, there's so many moments like this in the show where Jimmy is, he's using a faux expression of honesty to trick someone. Like in the episode where he's talking to Howard's wife, and he's like, hey, maybe I was too hard on Howard, and, you know, I guess I was just jealous of him. And like in his mind, I think consciously, this is just part of his scam, you know, using this like, you know, wow, surprising amount of honesty. But really he doesn't mean it, you know. But subconsciously he does mean it. There's many moments like that in the show, I think, when he speaks about Chuck at the kind of the hearing where they're trying to decide whether or not he's going to get his law license back, and he kind of talks a lot about his relationship with his brother. And Kim's really moved by it, and then he's like, did you see those suckers? That one bastard was crying. And Kim is like blindsided by this. But I think he meant a lot of it. But he's just, he refuses to acknowledge to other people, i.e. Kim, and also himself, I think, that he really means some of those things. And so in this case, he's just using a last-ditch effort to give Jeff some time to wake up and make off with the clothes and stuff. But, you know, he says, like, you know, I got no wife, I got nothing. And he's like, if I was to die tonight, no one would even care. It would take it would take them like 3 hours to clear up my apartment. That's it. That's the tiny little imprint I have on this world. And that is 100% true to him at that point in time. And so there's just really interesting, psychologically layered stuff going on. And it was just stressing me out, the amount he was looking behind the security guy. And I'm like, oh my God, you're giving the game away. And then, of course, the guy, he gets up and they get away with it. And it's satisfying, and I'm thinking, where do we go from here? And I started to suspect, and it was when the guy fell over, and I was like, hang on, wait. So I think he could use this against Jeff, and he might very well turn this around on him as a way to kind of clean the slate. And that's exactly what he does. They get back to Jeff's garage with the big box of stuff, and they're like loving it, like him and his brother. And then you get Gene going like, feels good, doesn't it? And he's like, hold on to that because you're done here. And he's like, you know what you did here today, right? And he just lists off all the felonies, all the laws that they broke. The fact that he made sure they rented a truck from a different state, I think. And so that adds even more. He's like, you're talking 10 years minimum. And, you know, it's like, well, it was your idea, they say to Gene. And Gene's like, yeah, well, it's a mutual self-destruction or something along those lines. And he's like, if I go down, you go down. And he knows his shit. And he basically convinces them that, like, you know, we are done here, meaning you are not going to badger me again. If you see me again, you cross the street. You're going to forget about me. You're going to forget about that mall. You're going to forget about all of this. And this is like Gene becoming Heisenberg. Like, he is making that power play. And you can really tell, I think, that, and even Marion says later on in the episode, she's like, oh, you know, Jeff's a good boy, but, you know, he fell into a rough crowd in Albuquerque. And so obviously he's had his problems with the law, perhaps, but you can tell that he's like not the brightest one, to say the least. And so I think that this very effectively wraps up this part of the story. I don't think we'll be hearing from Jeff again. I think Gene made a brilliant play in kind of getting these two guys to break a lot of laws. And, you know, so he's holding that over them. He has a blackmail for them now, much as Jeff has a blackmail for Jimmy and that I know you're Saul Goodman. But, you know, it was just perfectly played. I loved how it all came together. I loved that it was a whole episode of Jimmy just running a scam one more time. I loved the kind of, it was kind of a little bit of a wholesome kind of friendship with the security guards, and particularly the one who, you know, he was distracting the whole time. But it was, I don't know, it's nice. I like the black and white feel of it. I liked the way it looked. It was different. And it's just like, you know, we've had little black and white snippets for the past 7 years, and now we get an entire episode dedicated to it. And the whole button on it, which was absolutely brilliant to me. And also, I should mention that early on in the episode, he's going through his things, and it's kind of implying that he's running out of money. You know, he looks at the Armani suits, and it's just like, you know, you can't really afford that kind of stuff anymore. That was kind of the inkling that I got, was that he had the jewels, and maybe his supply is running a bit low, perhaps. But maybe that was intentionally inferred, maybe it wasn't. But the kind of the whole button on the entire episode, and it's, again, I see people online who are just like, that was a bad episode, nothing happened. And, you know, the final beat is Jimmy walking around the department store, and he's kind of like, yeah, I just I ripped off you guys and I got away with it. And he looks at this shirt, and he's got this kind of garish shirt that he's picked up off the rack, and he's wraps a tie around it, and he's looking at it, and he's looking at Saul. He's looking at who he used to be, who he, in a way, kind of became again. But I would argue this is more of a Jimmy moment than a Saul Goodman moment. But it's kind of a mix, really, because what he pulls on the two guys when he's like, you're going to go down for this amount of time, I think it's kind of, it's a blending of Jimmy and Saul. And he kind of relived that for a while, but it was out of necessity, it was out of survival. It was not because he wanted to do it or because he was making money even. It was pure survival tactics. And he looks at that shirt, and he kind of almost is, you know, you think maybe he's thinking of ripping it off or buying it even and splashing out, but he kind of smiles, he places it back on the rack, and he walks away, and we focus on that shirt and the tie. And that's the end of the episode. That, to me, was the death of Saul Goodman. In my opinion, it could completely change. I don't know. Some people have been speculating that he's left it there for now, but it'll come back. I don't know. I feel like he realizes that, you know, this has destroyed my life. You know, everything that he did in Better Call Saul, you know, was leading up to moments where his relationship with his brother like fell apart, and then his brother died. You know, his relationship with Kim was destroyed by their own kind of bad influence on each other. And then he became Saul Goodman, which was, you know, a great way of masking the pain and forgetting about the pain. But ultimately, it led him down a very dark path of, you know, it could have been the end for him. And he only just got out of it. And now here he is living a lonely, isolated, miserable life. And doing this kind of scam kind of probably brought a lot of memories back, brought a lot of kind of, you know, feeling back into him. You know, he's kind of living again in a way. And when he, you know, even when he's saying to the security guard, like, you know, I lost my brother, it's probably the first time he's mentioned his brother, whether he's talking about a fictional one that he's crying over or not. But, you know, I feel like he might be just, you know, now he's verbalizing things that he hasn't really verbalized in a long time. But, is a pivotal point for his character and his, you know, his life, I think, at this point. And when he puts the shirt down, to me, it's symbolic of walking away from that for good and knowing that he has to change. He can't prove Chuck right, you know. The only way that this show really nails an incredible landing is if we see a kind of a fulfillment arc for Jimmy where he changes. Because if he ends, because people are saying, well, you know, it should end with, you know, Gene pulling a Chicago sunroof on the taxi driver with a big smile on his face. It's like, you know, or it should be Jimmy becoming Saul Goodman again and just saying screw it and ripping off people. And it's like, well, I guess it would be kind of fun, but, you know, Jimmy riding off into the sunset as Saul Goodman, you know, it doesn't feel like a very satisfying, intelligent way to end the show. I don't think. I think he needs to change in some way or another. because otherwise, what's the point? Like, there has to be some, like Walter White. He didn't end Breaking Bad going like, I'm building my empire. No, he realized he was done, and he made his victory lap. Well, you could say victory lap, but it wasn't. There wasn't much victory to it. But he made his kind of his final rounds and kind of tried to do right with the damage that he had caused. But it needs to end with some kind of change, and I feel like this is the beginning of that change where he says, I'm done with that now. That was the last job. It was a necessity. It wasn't a choice or something that I sought out myself. So we're looking at quotes from episode Pimento from season 1. Slipping Jimmy with a law degree is like a chimp with a machine gun. I want to get like the whole. They don't have the whole thing. I love the whole monologue that Chuck has. And it's funny because I'm trying to do this as if I need to do the whole video in one take. I really don't. But maybe I'll just play it. Like, it's on YouTube right here. And there's an advert playing. Don't you just hate how YouTube has gotten so aggressive with ads? Like, we want to watch like some fun videos on the TV, and it's like, your video will play in like 8 minutes time after 17. There was a 30-minute ad that played recently, and I'm like, what are they doing? You could skip it, but like, so weird, right? Okay, so it's like the "you're not a real lawyer" thing. What a sick joke. Okay, let's just enjoy the beautiful lyricism of Michael McKean's words, if you can hear this.
I worked my ass off to get where I am, and you take these shortcuts and you think suddenly you're my peer? You do what I do because you're funny and you can make people laugh? I committed my life to this. You don't slide into it like a cheap pair of slippers and then reap all the rewards. I thought you were proud of me. I was. When you straightened out and got a job in the mailroom, I was very proud.
So that's it then, right? Keep old Jimmy down in the mailroom because he's not good enough to be a lawyer.
I know you. I know what you were, what you are. People don't change. You're Slippin' Jimmy.
That was it. I know what you were, what you are. People don't change. You're Slippin' Jimmy.
And Slippin' Jimmy I can handle just fine, but Slippin' Jimmy with a law degree is like a chimp with a machine gun.
That's it. It is relevant. I know what you were, what you are. You're Slippin' Jimmy. People don't change. That's so relevant. And I keep thinking about that. Like, it's, here he is. He's broken down. He's isolated. And, he becomes what he was again. He's Slippin' Jimmy again. But I feel like he did it out of necessity. And that's a marked difference than almost every other time we've seen him do it in both shows. I said, well, I don't know. I mean, really, in Breaking Bad, how many times have we seen him really run a scam like that? I guess he does. But in Better Call Saul, it's so much more elaborate, and such a part of the DNA of every fiber of his being. I just think, God, we need to see him make a notable change. I mean, I'd be fine with I don't want to talk too much about my thoughts on what the ending might be. I'd like to make a separate video about that perhaps, and just talk about some theories or things I might like to happen, but I wouldn't want anyone to, because it's tricky when you say, oh, maybe this could happen, and then people like it, and then they get disappointed when it doesn't happen, myself included, or you just don't want to hear anything that might be the ending. I've said to Connie, I think we should. She's like, shut up. She's like, you're too good at this. And I don't think I am. I think most of the time when I try and predict something, I get it wildly wrong. But even just the thought of it, Connie's like, no, I don't want to hear anything. But I might make a separate video about that and just what I'd like to see happen, what I think might happen. But then the next 2 episodes might change things again. But I have a feeling that we might go back to Breaking Bad in the next episode. I have a feeling that the penultimate episode will be a full Breaking Bad episode because Vince Gilligan wrote and directed it, but maybe not. It's hard to tell. Maybe the next episode will be a Breaking Bad episode, and then the penultimate one will be a Gene episode, but we transition into color somehow, and then the final episode kind of brings everything together. I don't know. But it makes me wonder, are we going to see Mike again? Will we ever see Gus again? Have we seen their final moments in the whole story? Because, they're not going to do anything. I mean, that's another thing I was thinking about. This is the final season of the show, the end of the story. And I was thinking, what if they make a companion film to El Camino? What if they make a Better Call Saul movie? Like maybe like Jimmy and Kim find each other at the end, and then we follow that. But I don't know. I think they should end it where they're going to end it. But sometimes you can wring out too much of a good thing, and I think that they've pitched this thing so fucking perfect. Like it is almost embarrassing how good this show is, and I loved this episode. It was fun. Just the writing is just absolutely phenomenal. There's so many little details in the writing that I could just waffle on about for ages if I had all the lines in front of me that I've already forgotten bits and pieces of. But like, when Jimmy kind of he's finished kind of blackmailing essentially the Jeffy and his brother, and then Marion's like, well, come on in, Gene, and Gene's like, don't mind if I do, and she's in there with Gene, and Gene's like, she's like, what happened to Nippy? And he's like, oh, you know what? He was with a family just down the road the whole time. And he's like, after all that, a happy ending. It's just like, you motherfuckers. I love the devilishness of putting that at this point in the show. Jimmy literally standing there saying, after all that, a happy ending. It's some fun kind of in a way fourth wall breaking with that one, but very funny. Where do we go from here? I don't know. And also intriguing to note that all the episodes have had something and something, like fun and games, plan and execution, point and shoot, rock and hard place. And then now, episode 10, it's just Nippy. And it really is like, now this is something completely different, a break from everything you've seen before. But yeah, man, 3 more episodes to go. Probably a good, 2 hours and 20 minutes, 2 hours and 30 minutes of story left in this entire thing. I can't wait to see what happens. So that's my thoughts on Nippy. I loved the episode. This is one of my favorite episodes of the entire show. I think I absolutely loved it. I thought it was so brilliant, and that final shot of him walking away from that shirt and that tie felt so powerful. And see, again, people saying nothing happened, it accomplished nothing. I'm like, it did so much. It did so much. How could you think that? But it is what it is, I guess. Not liking the difference or the tone, maybe, but I don't know. Like, we got the fun montage of him kind of like getting in with the security guards and everything. Even a very brief, tiny flash of the SG was here in the garbage room. Saul Goodman was here. Call back to season 2, I think. This is the split screen. It was a lot of fun. It felt like a bit of a film noir. It felt like a bit of a comedy, a heist movie in a way. Like just lots of influences, and overall I thought it was great. Really loved it. I like the guy who played Jeff too. And one last thing is that someone wrote this on Reddit, and it's clearly not the intention, but when you first see Jeff as the cab driver in season 4, and he's like kind of stood above Gene, and he's just like, you're the guy, say the thing, Saul Goodman, and there's a really intimidating thing, not passive aggressiveness, but like you feel there's a bit more going on with the jovial nature of him, and the fact that he knows he's Saul Goodman, and he is kind of a tall kind of guy. He feels a bit kind of like a big kind of dude, and he's kind of standing over him. And when we see him in this episode, he looks different. He looks suitably, I don't want to say odd, but I guess I just did. So he kind of fits, kind of doesn't, but he feels so different. He feels much weaker, and someone theorized that the way that Jimmy or Gene saw him at first was as a threat, but now he's taken control. Now he's decided to take care of this, and he's kind of devised the scheme so that when this cab driver sees him again, he's sat in his mother's kitchen, kind of laughing it up with her. Like, it's such a power move, like when she says, oh, my son's a cab driver, and Gene's like, oh, picked up anyone famous? Like, he it's a total power play. And he plays him like a fiddle for the whole episode. And in that sense, it's completely changed the dynamic. And so it almost fits that he looks different now. He looks meeker. He looks weaker, and I think that is actually kind of brilliant, even though it's not the intention at all. But it's a nice kind of, not even a retcon, but it's a nice way of looking at it or interpreting it, I suppose. But I hate recasting personally, and it's a shame they couldn't get the guy, but I think it worked out, and I just thought the episode was fantastic. So I'll see you next time for my thoughts on episode 11. I wish I'd done a live reaction because I was quite like into the whole heist thing, but I think I don't need to do them all the time. And I've done one substantial one now for the season, so I think that's good enough. So maybe for the finale, final episode, I don't know. We still got Walt and Jesse to come. I'm intrigued to see what they're going to do with that. And Bob Odenkirk has said that it's not just a, hey, look who we got. It's like it's a good story thing. So I'm wondering what the hell they can add at this point. But I'm intrigued to see what that will be. So thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one. Okay, I just wanted to add the brief addendum here, because there's something I forgot to mention, which is the intro. The intro to the show was slightly different in that it ended with the tape running out and just a blue screen and Better Call Saul in digital text. And being someone who grew up with the advent of digital tape and using camcorders and stuff, it's fun for me seeing all of those things in the intros over the years, because for the first 60 episodes of this show, it's been the same 10 intros every season, but with slightly deteriorating quality on the video, whether it's the tracking or fuzziness, static, and then slowly the color coming out. And it's been all black and white, I think, for season 6, and so they're telling a fun little mini story in the intros alone. But this is the first time it's been markedly different. I should add, I'll leave that one in for free, where the tape ran out. So is this kind of signaling like it really is a clean break from here on out, and the last 3 episodes are going to feel really different? And there was a guy on Twitter who was talking about it. He had a pretty good theory that because, the first 60 episodes of this show all had the same intro and then the tape ran out, will we now see, again, like I just said, something different, but like his theory is that it'll be, the last 3 episodes will be like El Camino. It'll be this big epilogue for Jimmy with some Breaking Bad flashbacks. I think that's a really good call. I think that might be what we're seeing in the next 3 episodes. It's kind of an extended 3 parts kind of, goodbye to the character and culmination and conclusion to the story, with some Breaking Bad flashbacks in between to fill everything out. I also really liked how he called this new version of Jimmy not Slippin' Jimmy but Schemin' Gene. And then someone else on Twitter pointed this out, and I thought it was quite funny how they said that literally Slippin' Jimmy returned and the scam almost ran awry because of someone slipping. Genius writing. So Slippin' Jeffy is probably going to become a meme at some point. But wanted to add that in. The intro was a really interesting one where it just kind of click and just the blue screen. Very interesting. Thank you again for watching, and I'll see you next time.